Hello and welcome to another episode of Chasing Excellence. My name is Patrick Cummings, and as always, I am here with Ben Bergeron every week on the show. We dedicate some time to exploring how we can live a life of better health and increased fulfillment. We answer your questions about the 5 factors of health, dive deep on living a life of excellence, and explore the strategies and frameworks to help us chase what truly matters. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us this week. How are you, Ben?
I'm good.
What do we got this week? We've got listener questions about trying to make the CrossFit Games while also trying to kick ass into our 90s, mindfulness in the middle of a Metcon, cheat meals, and more. Our workout this week is going to be a question about building connection and fighting loneliness as we get older. And we're going to wrap this up with another round of our recommendation roundup, where we just give some recommendations on books, movies, podcasts, whatever else we are enjoying. Ready?
Let's roll.
Our warm-up, we do start each workout with a warm-up. We start each episode with your questions about the 5 factors of health, those few fundamental behaviors that most positively affect our performance, vitality, and longevity. Those 5 factors are how we eat, how we move, how we think, how we connect, and how we recover. This first question is in our move category. It's from Robin. She asks, I'm a 55-year-old competitive female masters CrossFit athlete. I have a goal of making the games, but I also have a goal of kicking ass well into my 90s. Are those two goals mutually exclusive?
No, they are not. And we've done the research to kind of show this. We took blood work from a whole group of CrossFit athletes, people that went to our gym. And not surprising, the markers were better than the population. But what was really interesting, I did not expect, was this kind of goes in, flies in the face of some of the stuff, is the more people committed to this, meaning that the people that did this the most and the people, particularly the competitors, had the best blood work. So, are they mutually exclusive? No. But here's the difference is you could train yourself into some orthopedic issues, right? So you might wear down a knee a little bit. You might wear down a shoulder a little bit. But in terms of the kicking ass in your 90s, the longevity play and the health markers associated with it, no, they're actually completely in a line.
Is that specific to what you were looking at? Was that specific to a certain age demographic, or
no,
would you be able to extend that even to 20s and 30s?
Yep. So we did it across the spectrum, and then we broke it down into subcategories from male, female, age groups, and the amount that they train and what their goals were.
Interesting. And then is there a point, do you imagine that the training would you would tip that balance a little bit and it would affect?
No, that's what everyone says.
Yeah.
That's what everyone's saying is, it's healthy to a point. Well, that's not what we saw. It continued to get healthier and healthier and healthier as you went farther and farther and farther into the more intense training.
Interesting. All right. Our next question is from Jacqueline. It is in our Think category. She says, I have been a longtime member, nearly 5 years, of a CrossFit affiliate in Alaska. I'm currently a graduate student in a counseling psychology program. I have incorporated recovery into my routine for most of this time, such as stretching, yoga, prayer, meditation. It wasn't until recently that I realized the power of mindfulness during workouts, though. Recently, I did a workout that included several rounds of rowing, burpees, and running. I had a plan for maintaining intensity on the burpees and executed that. For a long time, I've enjoyed Metcons because I feel it's a rest from thinking and being in my own head, and I get to just move my body. But when I really applied myself and was present, pushing myself through the burpees, I was very happy with my performance. What are some ways that CrossFit affiliates and/or coaches can or have brought attention to this? I appreciate cues from coaches like great work, push harder, but I wonder if there's a more applied way to increase awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that she started with, first off, super cool that she's following us from Alaska and psychology and CrossFit and all the rest. But the great part is that she had this epiphany, she had this realization, she had this awareness, and she's using the word awareness. That's so we can step function this thing. Step one is, and it sounds ridiculous probably to the people that listen to the show because we take it for granted essentially. But step one is, are you aware that there is a voice in your head? And Jacqueline just recently had that epiphany that it's happening in her head when she is working out. That's really, so Is there a way that coaches can go beyond the cheerleader of good job, keep pushing? Yes. And it starts with asking the athletes, asking the members to listen to the voice inside their head. That's really, you have to become aware of it. She's using the right words. Is there a way that we can become more aware of this? That's it. From there, once you have this level of awareness, then understand what is that voice saying. And let's put in two easy categories. Is that voice a coach or is it a critic? And a critic, just let's understand what that is. A critic sits on the sidelines, is not in the game, and just points out the faults of the one participating. That's what a critic does. This is where they went wrong. This is where they stumbled. This is where they fell. Whereas a coach is productively trying to improve the performance of the athlete. And we just want to then from there, there's a whole host of tools that we could use to try to edge away from that critic. And we're all going to have a critic at some point. It doesn't go to zero, but we want that to be edging towards the coach and not the critic. That's what's amazing about the way that we train, is that it's challenging enough that the critic is going to pop up. Mm-hmm. And at some point in your life, the critic is going to pop up. And what we need is the tools to be able to move in real time from that critic to a coach. And that's how, which one would you want walking around with you in everything you do? Like you're about to go into a public speaking presentation, and would you rather have the critic going like, you suck at this. Say you're a terrible public speaker. They're not going to listen to you. They're certainly not going to fall for what you're trying to say. You imposter. Mm-hmm. That's a horrific way to go through any experience. Or do you want a coach? Just remember, look them in the eye and you're talking. You know how to talk incredibly well. You've been doing this for decades and decades and decades. This is no different. Go in there and have a conversation with these people about this subject that you know so well, way better than they do. They don't know you have a script that you're trying to follow. If you go off the script, no big deal. You're just talking to these people. And all of a sudden, like, if we could bring that to every aspect of our lives improve in a magnitude that we probably can't predict. Mm-hmm. So that's what we want to be able to do. And the workout is that training grounds for that. And that's what's so powerful, what Jacqueline just went through. Whoa, when I had this awareness, this mindfulness of this voice in my head during the burpees, and I was intentional with trying to steer this in the right direction, I was really happy with the results. Mm-hmm. That's what we should be trying to do as coaches, to get people aware of that, not just, good job, Bill, you push harder. That's kind of, I think of it in terms of, are you a cheerleader as a coach? Rank yourself. Are you a cheerleader? Are you a trainer? Or are you a coach? Cheerleader is there for that. It's like what you get in spin class. Let's go, guys. Time to go. We're climbing the mountain. Like, woo, like the rah-rah. The trainer will talk to you about points of performance. Get your knees out, way back in your heels, get your elbows up. Okay, let's try to pace this thing this way. But the coach talks to the whole person, mm-hmm. not just the way the body is moving, but the whole person. And that's what we want all of our coaches to be able to do.
Yep. And to a degree, to what Jacqueline's speaking, we also want to be able to do that for ourselves.
Well, that's the idea. Now you rank yourself.
Yeah.
Remember, we said critic or coach. Cool. Now that you're a coach, are you a cheerleader? Mm-hmm. Going, come on, you got this. Like, are you a cheerleader? Yep. Are you a trainer? Come on, push your knees out, like you hold the pace. Or are you a coach speaking to your whole body, mm-hmm. understanding truly what is the best thing for you?
Yep. Cool. All right. Next question is from Shane. It's in our eat category. If one prioritizes unprocessed foods and is careful about what they eat, do you think it's okay to have a weekly cheat meal with fast food and very processed foods? I've often felt a bit flat for the next couple days after that. Am I undoing some of the good of being so disciplined the rest of the week?
Shane. Okay. So Shane has two questions in there. Yep. The first one, is it okay? Yep. Yes, it is. The second question, am I undoing?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Yep.
But both are okay.
Yep.
It's okay to you don't have to live a perfect life. It's okay to undo it. I'm not going to say, no, a cheat meal doesn't do anything. It does. Like a cheat meal is, if you do a cheat meal, it's not healthy. Mm-hmm. Like, let's just call it what it is. Now, it might be healthy in the scope of the full picture, right? This is the thing that helps me keep on track. It helps me be social. It helps me allow to just, cool. Then that's where it's okay. It can be okay. Doesn't mean it's that you actually get like, there is no insulin spike because it is the one thing. No. So you just have to figure out where this thing fits into the whole spectrum of it. And this is where it becomes completely individualized. If you find, Shane, that it's detrimental for 3 or 4 days, then I would say maybe the cheat meals don't need to be as big. Cheat days don't need to be as big. And or try and go off them for a little bit and see how you feel that way. And you can also figure out how to do quote unquote cheats in different ways, right? You know, it could be I'm getting acai bowls and parfaits and having, you know, some cereal, as opposed to like I'm going to TGI Fridays, getting the blooming onion, and then going to Ben and Jerry's and getting them for Monster.
I like that you know what those are. I have no idea what those are.
You don't know what those are?
No.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I know the blooming
Says
onion.
the guy that lives in Maine.
Yeah.
Doesn't know what a chain restaurant is.
Have you found, I mean, you've worked with in some capacity, like hundreds and hundreds of athletes now, just through the gym. Have you found, if you had to like put people on a spectrum, have you found that people are better off when they are really strict but have some cheat meals, or when they're really strict all the time, or when they're kind of like moderately strict? Is there anything that you've noticed, maybe even with yourself, where the sustainability play is fill in the blank? Or is it really like different things work for different people and I can't figure out why one works for one and one doesn't work for another?
I wish I could give this is what I've seen, but the honest answer is it's everybody's different. It's the same type of thing. My wife and I, Heather, are polar opposites in terms of she could have like 3 clusters of granola and be like, that was yummy. And be like, good.
And you're like, whole box.
Yeah. I have 3 clusters and I'm like, so I do so much. And that's what allows her to stay clean the rest, like on all the other ones, because she knows she can have these little things. Whereas I am, if I go anything off the rails, it's like you let a gorilla on rabies and steroids out of the cage and he's going to go destroy the whole city.
All right. Next one's from Edwin in our recover bucket.
I think of that Rampage game. Like, do you remember that Rampage game when you were a kid, the arcade game, the gorilla that destroys the city? Like, he's like King Kong. And
no, but I can't imagine.
Oh my God. You are, we got a lot of,
we got a living to do. We got a lot of living.
We got a lot of living to do. Go to TGI Fridays and play Rampage.
Go to the arcade. Edwin, I've been thinking about recovery and the well-known fact that that muscles need to rest between sessions for about 48 hours. This makes me a bit perplexed. CrossFit is so varied and works so many muscle groups that it does not make sense to me. If I do a heavy leg day with squats and lunges on Monday, would I harm my recovery if the next day I train a long workout involving my legs? Or is it mainly the heavy strength training that requires a bit of recovery? Generally, I would say that every CrossFit session is in some aspect, or does in some aspect involve my legs, for example. How would I go about thinking about recovery in that case?
I'm trying to, okay. He's right. So like, yes, like there is that principle of, when you recover, you get stronger. It's it's the adaptation principle where, during rest is when you get stronger. And that's where it came from. But it came from bodybuilding, where you do one body part per day. Everyone knows, like Monday's chest day. Yeah. Like Mondays were the best because you got to do chest day. No guys skip chest day, and maybe girls go and do butt day or whatever it is. And you would trash the muscles so bad that, you need to take the 48 to 72 hours afterwards. And that's the recipe for hypertrophy, for muscle growth. And that is a really powerful recipe to get that. CrossFit's not interested in, that's not the goal. So we get it as a side effect, but it's not the goal. We're a little bit closer to like swimmers. And wouldn't it be weird to go to swim practice on Monday and you show up on Tuesday and coach is like, all right, everybody in the pool. And you're like, whoa, coach. I swam yesterday. I'll see you on Thursday. Right? It's because swimmers aren't trashing their muscles. They're using them in a functional way to get from point A to point B. That's what we're doing. Now, caveat, asterisk, subtitle, There are times that we trash ourselves.
Yeah.
We do Karen, we do 150 wall balls, and the next 3 days, your legs are smashed.
Yep.
Yes, you're not supposed to go and do a bunch of lunges and squats following that. And this is where an elegantly programmed, thoughtful, methodical program takes this into consideration. And it's a reason that we train movements, not body parts. So there's 10 different macro movements. It's things like upper body pulling and pushing, lower body, upper body pulling and pushing, ankle dominant, hip opening, hip closing, holds, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
We want to, when we do a pulling motion one day, if you're following a good program like CompTrain does, you would not see upper body pulling in a big way. It also depends on load and intensity and volume dependent. But if we're going to do 150 pull-ups one day, you're probably not going to see 10 legless rope climbs the next day, right? You're going to see something, if we use our upper body, it'd be something like push-ups, which is using the different movement plane, which then requires different muscles. So it allows you to continue to work, but not the exact same muscle groups and patterns, particularly if they got overworked the days before.
Yeah. And that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's always been when people misunderstand CrossFit, they see CrossFit as randomness, not variance.
Yeah.
And what you're describing is variance. And what people see is like,
this is a cool thing we could dive into a lot, right? But you're exactly right. Variance means it changes. It's not random at all. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe some people are programming randomly. Hey, let's do Helen today. And tomorrow they're like, let's do Fran. And the next day they're like, let's do...
I've had days of those. I've had days, yeah.
Right. But if you understand programming and the methodology behind it, I'll take it as some examples. So today in CompTrain and in our gym, CF&E, we did a workout called Practical Joker, which was rowing, deadlifts, and toe to bar. Cool. So when you're rowing, you're using your legs, right? When you're doing deadlifts, you're using your legs. When you're doing toes bar, you're using your arms. Yesterday, we did biking and thrusters. When you're biking, you're using your legs. When you're thrusting, you're using your legs. When you're doing thrusters, you're using your arms. But the muscles you used in the thrusters are the opposite muscles that you use in a toe to bar. A toe to bar is an upper body pull, where a thruster is an upper body push. When you're doing a thruster, you're using your lower body, yes, but it's a squat dominant movement pattern, meaning you're using primarily quad, and then you're using it in a pushing fashion. Whereas today we did deadlift, you're using your legs, yes, but it's a pull. So you're using primarily posterior chain, hamstrings, glutes, and low back. So yes, you're using your legs, but if the program is set up appropriately, you get to ride this level of frequency without overtraining.
Got it. Okay. We could totally geek out on that for a while.
We'll leave it there. I like fun. I like talking about that stuff.
Last question we've got in our warm-up is in our Connect bucket, as it always is. It's from Stuart. How do you respond when a friend or coworker gives you advice like that you don't agree with? Trying to be open-minded and ask questions. However, sometimes I can't hold my tongue when somebody tries to quote-unquote health educate others with dogmatic or incorrect advice, such as questioning fruit and vegetables, or argues that only game meat is healthy. Okay,
there's two approaches to this, two aspects to this question. The first one is let them have it. Like, they're not wrong. They might not be wrong, right? Going with open mind, be curious like that. I've learned a lot from having conversations where I didn't recognize my own blind spots, or other times where I've been like, "Oh, dude, you're so wrong." You know, and then 10 years later, I'm like, "Oh, gee, now I understand that." Yeah. So that's the first one. Is like, it's not about politicking. It's not about trying to debate to get your way. Like, we don't need to do that. Instead, just ask questions. Like, you truly, we talk about this a lot in this podcast. Truly ask questions, being curious about why they think that. And maybe you'll end up learning something. And whether you learn something or not, the goal is not to try to convince them, or certainly not get frustrated as they talk about it. So that's the first one, is like, we don't need to try to convince people to come over to our side, whatever that side might be. The next one is this understanding of health. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier. And when you have this framework, and let's do a whole podcast on this because it'd be really fun to talk about. When you have this framework, it really helps to kind of put things understand where people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And this framework is really simple. There's the 5 factors of health: how you eat, sleep, train, think, and connect. Well, each one of those, there's a behavior of those that will make you sick. There's a behavior that will make you well, and there's a behavior that will make you fit. So let's take the nutrition thing, right? Mm-hmm. So the nutrition one is if you eat ultra processed foods, Doritos and candy, which, by the way, after getting back from Sweden, I don't know if we talked about this. I was so shocked at what they eat for snacks that I looked up the most popular snack foods in America, and it gave me a list of about 20. 16 of them are just legit candy.
Mm-hmm.
Skittles, Twix, Snickers, Starburst. That's our snacks.
Mm.
That's what we snack on. Then there was some things like Chex Mix and stuff like that weren't legit candy, but there was zero. Everything was ultra processed.
Yep.
Okay, so that if you eat ultra processed foods, you're sick. So again, I just want to bring it back up again. You take the 5 factors and you put them on the spectrum from sick, well to fit. If you eat ultra processed foods, you're going to be sick. If you eat processed foods, you're well. That sounds weird from this podcast, but processed foods is like deli meats, regular chicken you're buying from the supermarket, whole wheat breads, like those are all processed. Yep. Then from there, if you eat, the fit is if you eat clean. That's eating only produce and protein and all that stuff. Then you go in this conversation, the person goes, oh, they say that game meat is the only healthy, and you're like, okay, but what they're talking about is just put in the framework. What they're talking about is like moving somebody from like the really, really good to the ultra really good, right? Because game meat is healthier than eating processed meats. Yep. And they go, fruits and vegetables are bad. And you go, okay, like that's a kind of strange thing to say. Does it fit my spectrum of where I believe in this? No, it doesn't. So I'm going to ask questions and try to figure out why they would think that. Where are they getting that information from? You dig into that and you find out a little bit more about where this is coming from. It's like, that's the way I approach this thing. Is like, does it fit into our framework? If it doesn't, ask questions about it. If it does, then just go like, okay, but they're trying to talk about this. It's like the vegans versus the carnivores. Mm-hmm. They're both just trying to get people off of processed foods. Yep. And we don't have to argue either side of it.
Yep. Would you, we can do that in the spectrum across the health. And I know that's what the question was, but there's lots of areas of life where that's,
sure,
where it's not that, where I think people struggle just as much as whether you're arguing about fruits and vegetables or who knows what else, right? Whether it's politics or whether it's any number of other
social
things.
Media is a great thing that's ever
exactly.
happened.
Like what do you do in that case when you don't have that kind of framework? Or what would you do?
So what I would do, I'm always trying to, me, I'm trying to create a framework for everything.
Right. So you were on the fly.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know where this fits.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have this on my radar. So I need to know where this thing is. And if it sits outside of that, then either do I want to pull it in and put this as a piece of the puzzle, or I'm like, no, this piece does not fit. Mm-hmm. I don't want this in here right now. And it would be easier if we had a concrete example. Yeah. If someone's like, sniffing, markers is like really healthy. Like, okay, well, that's a health thing. I can't get out of the health thing, but that doesn't fit in the health framework. Yeah. The war in the Ukraine is ... Yeah. Okay, am I going to go like, do I want this in my framework of the life that I am leading and trying to go and try to get from where I want to be? Does it fit in here? Or is this a distraction? Yeah. And if it's a distraction, maybe I'll ask a couple of questions to make sure that it's a distraction as opposed to I'm going to pull on a couple threads and go, can I work this in? Should this be worked in? No, this is not going to get me to where I want to be. And you've said it, pay attention to where your attention is going.
Mm-hmm.
If your attention is going to something that's distracting you from where you ultimately want to go, you move on.
Mm-hmm.
You don't debate it. So in this case, vegetables are bad for you. Okay, I'm going to ask a couple questions about that. And if I realize it's not where it's going to help me get to where I want to go, like I'm going to move on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just you need to make sure we're moving the ball down the court.
Right. All right. Speaking of moving the ball down the court, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to jump into our workout, a listener question about how to find the right circle of people to surround yourself with. So stay tuned. This week's episode is brought to you by Timeline Nutrition. Head to timelinenutrition.com/excellence to learn about their signature product, MitoPure, which is the first product to offer a precise dose of urolithin A to upgrade your mitochondria function, increase your cellular energy, and improve your muscle strength and endurance. The fine folks at Timeline have been working on MitoPure for 15 years, and during that time, they've been busy, conducting 11 human clinical trials and publishing over 300 studies of urolithin A, with more in the pipeline. When you go to their website, you can get the details of all of this scientific rigor. You can read all about the randomized, placebo-controlled clinical trial that they ran that showed a significant improvement in muscle strength after taking MitoPure for 4 months, or another clinical trial that showed participants who took MitoPure for just 2 months showed a significant improvement in hand and leg muscle endurance when compared with participants in the placebo group. The point is, this stuff isn't just some fly-by-night supplement with iffy credentials. Timeline Nutrition is working hard to give your cells new life with high-performance products. They've got 3 products to do so: a berry powder you can mix into a smoothie or shake, a whey protein powder, and soft gels for those who like it quick and simple. To try it for yourself and to get 10% off your first order, head to timelinenutrition.com/excellence and use the code excellence when you're ready to purchase. Again, that's timelinenutrition.com/excellence. All right, we are back. We have a question from Victor. Victor says, as I age, turning 30 soon, I feel it's more and more difficult to connect with like-minded people every day. I currently work in a company where no one is really into sports or health or fitness, but more into partying, which is fine, but not in my interest, which makes it difficult to connect with people. I also don't have access to a CrossFit gym where I could potentially meet more people that might share common interests. So I currently train in a Globo gym, which is a whole different atmosphere. Any tips on meeting like-minded people to create that important circle of relationships around you? I will just say, I flagged this question because it's something I've been thinking about. And I kind of wanted to chat with you about. So this is my excuse, which is the Surgeon General of the U.S. probably like 2 months ago came out with a report that basically said, and I should have pulled it up. I don't have it right in front of me, but it effectively said that we are in the U.S. we have an epidemic of loneliness. And, there's stats. I think we talked about it with Dr. Wallinger, but like loneliness is roughly akin to like smoking some absurd number of cigarettes every day. And so it strikes me as a really important conversation that affects our health. We talk about connection all the time, but it's one of those things that I think we're not doing a very good job of figuring out what to do about it. Right? In the same way that we can make that argument about health broadly or fitness or nutrition, and what I think the connection bucket feels like it's something we pay lip service to. Like, yeah, that's important. But based on the data, based on what people are seeing, based on, I think, our collective experience, like we don't have a solve for this yet. I think CrossFit gyms are an amazing solve for it. But to Victor's point, we don't always have access to it, or we don't always have time to get there. We don't have the money to get into one, right? So I just thought this was an interesting question, and maybe give us an excuse to talk about the importance of relationships and the dangers of loneliness, which is really what Victor's asking us about.
Yeah, I'll give Victor a lot of credit too, because it's not that he doesn't have people around him. He has people around him that don't have don't speak the same truths. Yep. They don't have the same values. They're into partying and doing the other things, and he wants health, and he understands the importance of surrounding yourself with those people that have the shared values. That's pretty amazing. I'm a really big believer that your environment is more likely to change you than you are to change your environment. And if you're in a bad environment, you got to get out. That's just kind of the truth of it.
Yeah. Or in Victor's case, maybe a neutral environment. Doesn't seem like it's maybe that bad, but it perhaps isn't that good.
Correct. Yep. So how do you create an environment that, it's our 100 words of health. Yep. How do you create an environment that makes it easy to move a lot, have deep connections, sleep, and ... And the environment matters a lot. Well, the environment, the most important aspect of environment is the people in it. And this is why we talk about connection as much as we do, and Dr. Wallinger has talked about it in terms of the relationship with smoking cigarettes. You're more likely to be fat if your friends are fat than if your family is fat, meaning your friends dictate your health more than your DNA. Mm-hmm. It's absurd. It's an absurdly high number. You're like 171% more likely to be fat if your friends are fat. It makes total sense. If your friends are going and, drinking beer and having buffalo wings 5 nights a week, and they're just sedentary and that's the way that they get together and share that's what's going to happen. We see the same thing in terms of people trying to break addictions. They can break an addiction when they're in a new environment. They can put it back in their own environment, and the addiction resurfaces. It's more about the environment than it is the willpower or anything else. But there's this other aspect of not just being an environment, but the actual true connection you have with people. And this is where the loneliness thing rears its ugly head. And, we've never been more connected, but we've never been more isolated. Mm-hmm. And the connections that we have aren't necessarily real. I don't believe that you need, there's Dr. Wallinger's stuff as well it talks about both the number of relationships, but also the deep, meaningful ones. I'm just a huge believer in that you have to have the deep, meaningful ones. Mm-hmm. And I think if you have a few deep, meaningful ones, situations like Victor's in don't affect you because it's neutral. But if you don't have that deep, meaningful relationship, things like Victor's thing drag you down. Yep. And I think that's why it's really important to make sure that you have, I'm going to give because it's so elusive, it's so vague, it's so ambiguous. I think it helps to have some sort of concrete way of knowing, like they try to do for everything, right? If you want to, how do I know I'm not doing enough exercise? Well, if you exercise for 30 minutes, 3 times a week, you're doing enough exercise. How do I know if I'm eating too many calories? If you're eating, how do I know if I have enough water? If here's the way I would do it with the relationship side. And we'll talk in terms of the CrossFit and all that, the workout and all that stuff as well. But I think it's really important to have someone in your life that you can hug for more than 5 seconds a day. Mm-hmm. If you have to me, because I can't do that with my bro, just a guy, I have so many friends at the gym, but I do the guy thing, right? The high five slap with the back, pull it in close in the back thing. That's not a 5-second hug. Mm-hmm. So that means I have an acquaintance and a friend, not a true, deep, meaningful relationship. But I'm lucky enough to have my kids and my wife. Mm-hmm. And I'm lucky enough to have a couple best guy friends that I do hug for over 5 seconds. And to me, that's a really good, it's my own, but to me, that's my litmus test of because you have to trust that. There has to be something behind that. Because if you hug somebody for more than 5 seconds, it gets weird and awkward. Mm-hmm. If it's weird and awkward, then it's not probably there. Now, the way I think about this is you don't need to hug that same person every day, but can you hug someone every day for 5 seconds? Yep. And that's the power of having kids. Yep. You can truly, I've never felt the connection I have with my kids that I have with anybody else. Totally. Yep. It's wild, right? And that's so powerful. I've heard other people talk about if you are missing purpose in your life. This is a weird thing. It's a weird suggestion. If you're missing purpose in your life, you're lost, you know what to do. One of the more powerful things you can do is to have a kid. Because it immediately gives you purpose. Like, that seems like it's the last person that should have a kid.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that that is the prescription, that is the recipe to fix that, but it's a tool and it could do it. It just speaks to the magnitude of what that relationship is. And if you have a kid, it's I don't want to say it's hard to be lonely because you're still not going to connect on the way that you need to connect with an adult as well. To me, if you have a child, a loved one, and a friend that you can hug for 5 seconds a day that you see every day, we're probably doing pretty damn good in the connect bucket. As long as we're removing toxic people from the situation as well. Because if you have a kid that you get along with really well, but your spouse you think is the devil and it's a toxic thing, well, now we're balancing those two things out. I actually don't think we're balancing. If you have, I came across this recently as well, one person that's operating at a really high level of love is like, it equates to the power of like 50 people that are in a negative. That's how powerful that is. So I'm not going to say, if you have a really good relationship with your kid, but a terrible relationship with your spouse, you're a neutral. I think you're a net positive. That's why I don't think you need to have 50 of these really powerful relationships. Just 2 or 3 can really be incredibly impactful.
I'm gonna switch tracks just a little bit. I have a little stat in front of me that I think is interesting. It says the percentage of men with at least 6 close friends fell by half since 1990, from 55% to 27%. The study also found that the percentage of men without any close friends jumped from 3% to 15%, a 5-fold increase. So between 1990 and I don't know when this 1990. So let's assume
the last 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. Let's assume that.
Yeah.
And I bring that up, one, because I don't know if there's an angle of talking about men in particular. I do think that there's something different about, as it relates to loneliness and friendship between men and women, not between men and women, but men and women seem to have slightly different experiences here. I think about my wife. She's got 10 good friends from various stages in her life that she's been able to collect and maintain, and she still talks to them and all this. And for me, it's far more difficult. Yeah. And I don't have that. Like, she's got friends from high school, and I don't know anybody from high school anymore, right? And obviously, that's individual and it kind of dependent. But I do think that as men, it is harder. And I haven't quite figured out why. I haven't quite been able to put my finger on what about it is harder or why it's harder. But I'm curious your thoughts on that, because what you just said, the 5-second hug, the first thing, and the reason I found that stat is like, that's going to be that's hard unless you have kids and a wife like that. That's easy. I'll find somebody else. Right? That becomes harder. Okay.
So let's start with like, why? Why is it? And it's built into your biology. It really is. From the vast majority of the human existence, the job of the man was to go out and essentially be a warrior, a protector and a provider. That's what the job was. Fight off invaders, go out, kill some game, that type of thing. Provide for the family and protect the family. That didn't require high levels of emotional sensitivity. It certainly didn't require, vulnerability was at the opposite of what was needed there. And showing vulnerability, again, just understand what that is. Vulnerability is showing weakness. And if you showed weakness, which, by the way, vulnerability is also the thing that creates trust and creates closeness. It's the thing that, as a warrior, the first thing you're told not to do is never show weakness. Never. So that's where that came from. On the female side, their roles were to keep, have your pulse on the tribe and create strong bonds and connections. That's what their roles were. So once you have that prism of how to kind of like understand where we are right now, it's built into females now today that it's kind of just part of their DNA and their makeup, that they're social beings, where we are more isolated beings, and we're not on a deep biological level, showing vulnerability and getting close to people is not what we do. So it is more challenging, 100%. And I think it speaks to the same. I don't think we're the rare exceptions where we don't have lots of friends from high school. There's a number of different groups. It's really interesting when you were reading that statistic, how those statistics have dropped in terms of number of friends and risen in terms of zero friends.
Yeah.
I was at my my uncle's celebration of life a couple weeks ago, and he died at 75. So he was born in the late 50s, kind of grew up as a teenager in the 70s and 80s, had a young family in the 90s, which is where you're talking about. Yep. And I was shocked at the amount of, my dad gave one of the speeches at the celebration of life. He said, most people are lucky to have, 3 or 4, 5, 6 close friends. That's what most people are really lucky to have. I know I'd feel lucky for that. Yep. Jack had 5 or 6 close groups of friends. He had people that he went camping with. He had people he went biking with. He was a lawyer, so he had his law group. He had people that he did cross-country skiing with. It was all of these different groups of friends. And I think that's also a generational thing. I think that I don't know anybody like that now.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that, and really, they all, at least one person from each of these groups got up and talked, and they all talked like they were his best friend. And man, at my eulogy, I'd be pumped if 5 or 6 people got up, not representing groups, but 5 or 6 people total got up and said, this is how well I knew this guy.
Yep. That's fascinating. He sounds like he was a good guy. It leads me to think though about priorities, and kind of when I introduced this question, why I thought it was interesting is like, I think we're not doing a good job. I think you and I talk about the 5 factors all the time, but we will always admit that the point of the 5 factors is so that you can see across these 5 and say, where am I not stacking up here? Where are my weaknesses? Back to even that spectrum you alluded to earlier, which is like, training's good, eat clean, I got plenty of sleep, I'm a coach to myself. And then there's that 5th one, that connect bucket. And I even put it last in our list, not on purpose, because it tends to be the one that we push off to the side because it takes time, because relationships are messy, because sometimes they disappoint you, because you have a job and you've got to pay for a mortgage, and sometimes you got the kids, and there's sometimes not time to go out like you used to when you were in college and spend 3 hours. My wife always makes fun of me, but like, before kids, when we were still in the city, I would go to the gym for like 2.5 hours a day. And I wasn't training for 2.5 hours. I was there, but I was there because that's where all my friends were. Right. And I was like, that's where my happy place was. And I know that there were periods of CrossFit New England, but like this place was just like your happy place. And so we end up deprioritizing this one thing. But you read The Good Life by Waldinger, and it is the linchpin to a happy and healthy long life. We talk about kicking ass in our 90s all the time, and I know what people hear when we say that. It's, I want to be able to do thrusters. I want to be able to do a pull up, right? Like, so I'm gonna eat clean. But when we kick ass in our 90s, it's because, to your uncle's credit, we've got circles of people who look out for us and who we look out for, and who we reach out to, and who we make the priority, even though it's difficult. And especially now, there are so many distractions. And they're easy and convenient distractions that stand in the way of our doing the inconvenient but valuable thing of, hey, you want to go out next Wednesday night? Like, yeah, I've got to get a babysitter. I've got to do all these. But that 90 minutes is more valuable in the short and the long term than the Netflix show that you're probably going to watch. But yeah, Netflix is right in front of you, and it's a lot easier. So I don't really have a question there, except that hearing like Uncle Jack didn't accident his way into 6 groups of close friends. At some point, he realized this is bringing an immense amount of value to my life. Yeah. And how do I make sure I nurture that? How do I make sure that I don't lose sight of that as he's probably a successful lawyer, as my career grew, as my family grew, as I moved, as whatever. He made sure that he kept it as a priority.
Yeah. I think it's such a good highlight, Patrick, in making sure that this is not the 4 factors and 4B.
Right. Right.
This is the 5. This is the 5 factors. And here's a really powerful way to think about this. Just a handful of years ago, none of these factors were associated with health.
Yep.
Like 0. It was luck of the draw.
Yep.
It was honest. It was like, oh, she got that disease. Oh, he ... Yep. And then all of a sudden people were like, well, maybe exercise and maybe nutrition matter in terms of health. It sounds crazy for us to even think that. Of course, it's just, for this community,
for us, it's assumed at this point.
It's assumed. That was not that long ago.
Yeah.
When we're talking just
there was a day that Richard Simmons was not a thing, and then he became a thing.
So there was if you exercised in the 50s, you were a weirdo. That was it. You were like, and then all of a sudden, you're seeing Anchorman. It's like, they're doing this new thing called jogging.
Jogging.
Yeah. What is it? It's where you just go for a run, you just keep running. It's like weird.
Yep.
So, and it was only, I looked this up a while ago, so I'm gonna get the numbers wrong, but even in the 1970s, I think there was less than 1,000 gyms in the United States total. Like there wasn't 1,000 gyms in the United States. So going to one was a very strange thing. And then there's the exercise boom in the 80s, but even then it was about looking better.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't understand. It was about lose weight to try to look better in a bathing suit or build muscles to try to look better naked. It's like, that's what the intention was. And it really wasn't, this is a weird thing, until like the late 90s, early 2000s that people were like, no, this improves your health.
Mm-hmm.
Is that weird?
That's very weird.
And then even still today, some doctors don't believe it. Same thing with nutrition. Nutrition had 0 correlate to your health for a very, very long time. And even today, some people believe it doesn't affect it. Dr. Stanford, who is a PhD at Harvard and is part of the Biden administration that sets health policies, says what you eat does not affect how fat you get. It's not about eating. It doesn't matter. She says it's all about brain chemistry that you're born with. Are you like right now, really smart people still don't believe nutrition has to do with health?
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. But we're catching up.
Yep.
Now, just in the last 5 years, people are, and once in our community, we go, what if, of course, the people, once you accept it as a norm, it's hard to imagine it not being. But now people are understanding sleep. But lack of sleep used to be a badge of honor for a long time. Like it used to be a cool thing. Like I only sleep 5 hours a night. Like Elon Musk told you he said that's how you get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
That was his recipe for being a better businessman. And now people are understanding sleep. Well, now people are starting a little bit to understand this think thing, right? With meditation and mindfulness. And maybe this has something to do with health. And they're also just maybe starting to understand your relationships and getting out into nature matters as well. But it's just, this is so at the forefront that it's not even forget about mainstream conversation. It's not in anyone's conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I promise you, in 3 or 4 decades, it will be.
Mm-hmm.
Just like everyone accepts that exercise and just everyone that accepts food is. It's that we've been a little bit on the forefront of this thing. And it's why it's still on the outside. People go like, yeah, got to make time to sleep, got to make time to eat right, got to make time to go to the gym. And yeah, there's that relationship thing that, Ben and Patrick talk about. Yep. Yeah, but we'll get to that when it gets to it. It might be number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of when they, the Good Life and the Harvard study says it is number 1. So I'm not gonna put all my eggs in one basket, but it might be the number 1. Yep. I just don't think there is one. It's the balance across them all. And this is, going back to that sick, well, fitness continuum, you can map everything on that continuum. So think of the bell-shaped curve. On one side of the bell-shaped curve, on the lower left-hand side, you have sickness. In the top of the curve, you have wellness. And on the other side of the curve, you have fitness. You can map all things associated with health on that spectrum. And people know real easy, the doctors know this. Like when you go there, they take your resting heart rate. Okay, if your resting heart rate is 100, you're sick. If your resting heart rate is 75, you're well. They don't talk to you about anything. If your resting heart rate is 50, they're like, whoa, are you a triathlete? Are you exercise? Is your heart rate always, you're fit. Same thing with fasting glucose. If your fasting glucose is 110, you're sick. If your fasting glucose is 90, you're well. If fasting glucose is 70, you're healthy. We can do this with your deadlift. Can you deadlift half your body weight? If you can't deadlift half your body weight, you're sick. You can't perform everyday function. Deadlift 1 times your body weight, you're well. 2 times your body weight, you're fit. Here's the awesome part. You can do this with the 5 factors. We already talked about with food. Mm-hmm. If you eat ultra processed food, you're sick. If you eat processed food, you're well. If you eat clean food, you're fit. Now, if you do that with relationships, let's do that. If you have toxic relationships in your life, you're going to be sick. Mm-hmm. That's a shame, but guess what? If you have friends and acquaintances, like coworkers that you get along with and people that you talk to on social media and text, you're doing fine. You're not, if you have those people that you love, meaning the people that you can hug for over 5 seconds, you're doing well. You're fit. Oh, not well. Mm-hmm. You are fit.
Mm-hmm. You fit.
Now here's the way to take this. Now you also do that with think, and you do it on the, victim, optimist, warrior mindset. You do that with sleep. You do it 5, 7, 9 hours. And here's the idea is we want to be on the right side of that spectrum on all 5 factors. It's not how far you go in any one of them. You don't get extra credit for being able to do a whole bunch of deadlifts and pull-ups and run fast if you have toxic relationships. Mm-hmm. You want to be on this side, on the right-hand side of that bell curve in all categories. And the goal is move all of them to the well category. Once you get them all to the well, then if you want to, go chase some of the things over that way. Mm-hmm. Totally cool. But you're not doing yourself any services by eating, everything out of your garden and, training for the CrossFit games. If you have toxic relationships, mm-hmm. You're much better backing off on those 2 things and bring your relationships up. That is how you get to well. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Wrapping this up, back to Victor's question. Anything any advice given, everything we just talked about, his question was any tips on meeting like-minded people that create that important circle of relationships. To me, the big takeaway just from thinking about this is it only happens when you decide to make it a priority.
Exactly right. So if you're going to make it a priority, what would be a suggested actionable for Victor?
He said this in his questions. I currently work in a company where there's no one into sports, health, and fitness. Where you work is a choice you make. Might not feel like it. Might feel like I have to be here because it pays me X, Y, and Z. But if you look at work with an abundant mindset, you start to recognize that there is work everywhere, and we live in an incredible time that work can be everywhere, and that can be a bad thing. But it can also be everywhere, and that can be a good thing. Mm-hmm. And so if, like we've talked about before, if you spend a good amount of your time at a place and that place is creating an environment that is pulling you in one direction and it's not pushing you in the direction you want to go, it's a choice every day you wake up and you decide to go back there. Doesn't mean it's an easy choice to make.
Hard choice.
It's a very hard choice, but it is a choice that you can start to make. You can make a different one.
The good life is made up of hard choices.
Exactly. And you can make a choice that, if maybe doesn't put you in a place where you're surrounded by the right kind of people, puts you in a context in which, one of his things is I don't have access to a CrossFit gym. Okay, that means you've made a choice about where you're working and the place in which you live so that you can work in that job. There are a lot of CrossFit gyms out there. There are a lot of places you can move to that would give you the kind of life that would allow you to prioritize friendships that you probably already have or family that you probably already have, but you're maybe too far away to see them. Okay, well, that's a choice you can make. You can find a job somewhere closer to that. You can find a job somewhere that's maybe it's in a city so that you can be surrounded by people, right? Like there's an infinite amount of things that once you recognize that where you work is a choice, how you work is a choice. Again, it can be a difficult choice to change, but to me, thinking about the 5 factors is to try to equally weight across all 5. It's not going to be easy to do that. It's not going to be easy to go across that and say, okay, I got to move this one up there. It's not easy to increase how much you're sleeping. It's not easy. It's more expensive. It's more time consuming to cook your own food, right? Like all of these things, as you move across that spectrum, go from easy and convenient and empty to hard and inconvenient and filling. Yep. And that includes work. That includes where you live. That includes the people you're currently surrounding yourself with. You could stay there and you can continue down that road where that's pointing you and you know where that's pointing you. Or you can put your big boy pants on and say, it is my responsibility to put myself in a place where I am the healthiest.
Man, I love that. I love you started with this abundance mindset. Yep. That's phenomenal. You know, I believe the greatest thing we can aspire towards is, I shouldn't say the greatest, one of the great things we should be aspiring towards is freedom. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily freedom from, which I think freedom from prosecution, freedom from injustices, freedom from slavery, freedom from a whole bunch, but freedom to. Yep. And the freedom to really is singular. It's the freedom to choose. That's what you're talking about. I think that we inherently kind of operate from I think it's difficult to operate from that abundance mindset because we feel like we're kind of stuck where we are. Yep. But we're not a tree.
Yep.
If you don't like where you are,
make
the hard choice to move.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say is encourage a bias towards action. Because it's so easy to sit and kind of wait for something to happen, as opposed to doing, again, the hard thing, which is, okay, there's not a CrossFit gym near you. Start one. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean find a building and a lease and buy a rogue rig and all that stuff, but like go online and go, you're at a Globo gym, like go, hey, I'm working out at this Globo gym at this time. Anyone want to go in the back parking lot with me and do grace tomorrow? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that's the right suggestion, but it's a bias towards action. Yep. Better than sitting on your hands and going like, when is this going to change?
Yeah. All right. We're going to leave it there.
Victor, great question. I'm glad that you're aware enough to
recognize that.
That's exactly right.
And now to your point, now it's do something about it. Yep. All right, cool. We're going to be back in just a minute with a new shout out and a recommendation roundup where we'll share a few things that we have been enjoying. So stay tuned. All right, we are back. This is our shout out where we take just a minute to read a comment, a YouTube comment or a review from Apple Podcasts or a note that Ben and I have gotten, mostly as a way to just say thank you for continuing to engage with us in this way. This is from Sophie. She sent me this note on Instagram. Just over 3 years ago, I sent in, I love this message. Just over 3 years ago, I sent in a message with a question on finding joy and happiness in a career which I did not enjoy. I told you about my career as a registered critical care nurse and my lifelong dream of becoming a firefighter. Ben's response all those years ago really helped me stay in nursing to pay for life and to help pay towards investments into my dream. I continued to grind, and every day I worked towards this goal. I never gave up. I never doubted my dream and certainly never lost the faith. Well, it's with a full heart that I wanted to let you know that I finally got accepted into fire school. And next year I'll be a firefighter. I'm hanging up my scrubs for life and I'm never looking back. The news, only finding out about this a week ago, still hasn't quite hit me. And I'm still punching myself. I think maybe pinching myself. Punching myself. I'm still punching myself thinking I'm about to wake up. Maybe it is punching yourself. I'd like to thank you for chasing excellence as your message really is truly appreciated by myself. And I'm sure others can echo that.
Heck yeah.
And when I checked in with her, she was like midway through firefighter school. I don't know if that's what they call it. Firefighter training. And she said it was going great.
Amazing.
So
love
keep
that.
Keep it up, Sophie. And by now she is likely fully into the new life. So awesome. All right. Our cool down. we are going to do a recommendation roundup where we spend a couple minutes talking about what we've been enjoying, watching, reading, listening to, partaking in. You want to go first?
You go first.
You want me to? Okay. So I'm going to, this actually, I hadn't thought about this before you mentioned it, but the jogging, a lot of that was Nike.
Called jogging
was because of Nike and because of Phil Knight. And there's a movie that just came out with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon called Air. That was really, really good. It's on Amazon Prime. I just randomly,
my kids watch it. I heard there's a lot of F-bombs. Is it okay?
Gosh. I don't remember if there's a lot of swears.
Then it's probably not.
It wasn't. I don't think it was so much that I'd be like, oh yeah, no, don't do that.
Because I looked it up. I was like, would this be appropriate for kids?
There was nothing other than maybe a couple curse words. There was nothing in there that would be
I'm going to watch it because that's what I've been, great.
So it's called Air. I found it on Amazon Prime, though you can probably find it elsewhere. So that's one. What was again, I should have thought of this before, but I'm just thinking about it. I never think about this until like we have to talk about what we've been enjoying. What was the movie that I had sent you? I was like, hey, you and your kids would like this. It was the sailing movie. Do you remember what that was called? I could find it.
Dang. I don't, but maybe look it up while
you give me one.
She had a pink boat. She sailed around. It's a real life story.
Yep.
She was
Australian. She was the first, like the youngest solo sailor.
Yeah.
She was Australian. Nuts.
Yeah.
I'll find it. You give me something, and then I'll yell when I find it because I've got to Google it. It's on Netflix. Anyways, that movie was good.
Yes, we enjoyed that movie as well. Yeah. I'm excited to watch Air. Okay, I recently have read 2 books, and I went through a big drought where I couldn't find a good book for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it's so fun when you read like
True Spirit.
There it is.
All right. True Spirit.
Sailing movie.
It's really,
that's a good family
it's good.
movie.
And yeah, my kids loved it.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's weird how this happens. Like you go through like a long time not being able to find a good book, and then you read a couple of good ones in a row, and I'm in a good spot right now. The first one is 10x is easier than 2x. Just came out. Benjamin Hardy and Jim something Sullivan, who's a founder of Strategic Coach. Mm-hmm. And it's really, there's a lot of like profound takeaways from it. And it's mostly about how to shift your mindset. And the idea is
Dan Sullivan.
Thank you. The idea is 2x is about how do you get to 2x? You just have to work harder. Mm-hmm. That sucks. Right? Yep. And if you have the concept of going 10x, you have to fundamentally change the way you're approaching everything. Yeah. And 10x is easier than 2x. And it's really neat. There's a lot of cool things in it. So that was one.
I get that. Yep.
And a second one is, I'm probably going to get his name wrong, but it's the Almanac of Naval
Ravikant.
Yes.
Yep.
Have you read it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I really liked it a lot.
So it's called the Almanac.
I can't believe you didn't suggest that to me.
I did years ago. Yeah. When I first read it.
Oh wow.
And
I just ignored you?
The name of it. No,
I made fun.
Yeah.
Because it's a weird name.
It is. He's a fascinating guy.
Yes.
Look him up. But the book was, I just think it's fascinating. The book was written by a guy who, I don't know that he had permission when he started. He got permission as he was writing it, but he went in and he started just like pulling all of the interviews and all the Twitter threads and started to like collect it and organize it and put it together. I just love that as an example of like, there's this phrase out there called he was a permissionless apprentice, which is just this fascinating concept by his name's Jack Butcher, who runs something called Visualize Value. Anyways, the point is like we live in an era now where you don't need permission to add value to somebody's life, to add value to the world. And so often we've been taught to like wait your turn, and when I give you permission, you can go do that thing. And at least as the beginning of that project was completely permissionless. He's just like, I'm going to start doing this. I think it's valuable, and it's a bestseller. It's like it's wildly, and the book is amazing. So,
it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So the next one is, I got a couple books. One is, his name is, author is Lewis Burgess. It's called Wanting: The Power of Mimetic Desire in Everyday Life.
What was that word?
Mimetic desire.
What
I didn't know what
that?
this was either. So mimetic desire is the concept that we don't want what we want because of some like inherent thing in us and like some inherent thing in that. but we want what we want. We learn what we want by seeing what other people want, and then we want that thing.
Oh my God.
It's fascinating.
Yes.
It's a really, really interesting idea and a really, really powerful idea to get yourself to understand, like, why am I attracted to fast cars? Why do I want new, like 17 pairs of Nobles? Like, whatever it might be. The argument of the book, the argument of like the is that we're translating what other people want, and we're taking that and putting it in ourselves, because we want not what they want, but we want to be what they are.
I can see how that would be beneficial from a survival mechanism, right? Like that's the quickest way to learn. Like that person wants those berries. Like I should.
There must be something good about those berries,
right?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of evolutionary sense.
So it's fascinating. So it's called Wanting the Power of Mimetic Desire in Everyday Life. And then the second one is called How to Begin. Start doing something that matters. And this is actually by, I've mentioned him a few times, Michael Bungay Stanier. He wrote The Coaching Habit and The Advice Trap. And this is, I think, his third book. But it's a really interesting kind of step-by-step process to figure out what he calls, like we figure out what your worthy goal is. So figuring out what do you have to figure out in order to construct what a worthy goal is? And he's got some ingredients like, this is a worthy goal. I think it's like, is it daunting? Is it thrilling? And there's a third ingredient that I'm blanking off the top of my head, but like, okay, so that, and then each kind of chapter, each kind of section of the book is like, okay, take the next bit of that, the next piece of the process of, achieving that worthy goal. What does that look like? What does that look like? So really good. I thought it was a really nice kind of step from what a lot of people do is just like big, hairy, audacious goal. And this book was like, cool, make sure you have designed the right kind of goal. And then here are the steps that often get in, or the barriers that often get in the way, and the steps around those barriers.
Cool. Great.
Thanks everybody out there for listening. Thank you for your ratings and your reviews. Big thing, if you've got questions, you want to get into the queue, find me on Instagram, drop me a DM, PS Cummings. I would love to get a whole bunch of new questions so that Ben and I can tackle this as we get through the summer and beyond the summer into the fall. So again, find me on Instagram, PS Cummings. Drop me a DM. I promise you I will get into our list and into a future episode. Thank you in advance for doing that. Okay, Ben and I will be back next week for another episode of Chasing Excellence.